So let's talk about the objectives. But I wanted to take just a couple of moments to kind of allow everyone to take a breath. We're getting lots of questions within our inbox, and we've gotten lots of questions about what this is and what this looks like. And I can feel the worry and anxiety that exists within the LEAs and the concern. So let me start off by saying the intent of this data collection is not in any way, shape, or form a witch hunt. It is not our attempt to punish districts. It is not our attempt to be mean to districts. All we're trying to do in this instance is to learn a little bit more. We are not trying to identify any individual teacher, any individual paraeducator, any individual special education director, or program specialist who might be not offering services. That is not the purpose of this data collection. The purpose of this data collection is for us to learn a little bit more about where districts at the district level, not at the school level or the student level, are struggling to provide an adequate number of services for students. And we want to learn more so that we can provide the support that's necessary for those children, so that we can support the LEAs to provide those supports. So it's really about understanding a little bit more about what's happening in LEAs to support. And I know and I understand that our monitoring hasn't always felt that way. Our monitoring has sometimes felt like CDE is being mean to us, or they have things happening to us. And that is not the intent of this data collection. The intent is we don't understand right now what's happening. We don't understand the data, and we want to understand it more. And then we can identify LEAs who at a systemic level are not providing services to students in general. It is the reason that we selected this method of data collection instead of putting it at the student level through CalPADS or through another type of data collection, because we're truly trying to understand what's happening at the LEA level. What I don't want this data collection to become is we are removing students from being able to access field trips or go to PE or those kinds of things in order to make sure that they receive their services. That is not the intent, and we will continue to ask ourselves and ask you all as we go through this process on whether or not we're getting at the right place. So I just want to kind of put it into perspective for you all to understand that we are trying to identify LEAs at an LEA level who are not providing supports generally to their students. Not every student everywhere. Okay. So I kind of wanted to start with this. We are doing this to help understand more about our monitoring responsibilities under IEPs and IEP supports. We want to identify and categorize where LEAs are struggling to provide services. We know that this is sort of a multi-layered issue that occurs within the LEA. And so we want to understand it more. But right now, we don't have any understanding of where's there the problem, how can we dig deeper? So that's kind of what I wanted to put forth for everyone to understand a little bit more about what we're doing. This is also the first year of this data collection. So we anticipate we're going to learn a lot, and we're going to refine and make it better and easier as we move forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so how is this going to work? So what's going to happen is we're going to provide to you all a list of students. It's not going to be every student in your district. It's going to be a sample of students in your district, pretty much a random sample. And we're going to ask you, can you tell us how many of those students received their IEP services? And you'll tell us in a percentage. You're not going to provide us individual student level data. You're not going to tell us which students did not. You're going to say, in general, our students, this is the number of students that we had. And so it's about us understanding a little bit more about at the LEA level. Now, the number of students we're going to provide you is going to depend on the size of your LEA. So if you're between 1 and 100, We are going to give you a maximum of 20 between 101 and 199 students with disabilities. And this is the number of students you have as of census date. You will review 20. If you are between 200 and 499, it's going to be about 10% of your IEPs. So for example, if you have 400 students with disabilities as of census date, we're going to ask you to look at 40 students, and that will go up to 500. If you have more than 5,000 students with disabilities on any given day or on census date, that given day, that one census date, then you would review 500. So it really is based on the size of your LEA. Next slide, please. And I know we're getting lots of questions in the chat. We're trying to go through them, or not in the chat, in the Q&A. We'll do our best to go through them and try and give some space at the end to go through ones that we're able to answer. So what kind of information are we looking for? So you all will look at the data that you have in your system, and you will look at the students we provide you, and then you'll say, how many of those receive between 95 and 100% of their services? And how many receive between 90 and 94.9% of their services? And how many receive less than 90? So what we're not asking for is student level data back. We're just asking you to identify the students of the, say, 40 or 500 students we provided you, how many fall into each category. So you all kind of will calculate those pieces together. Next slide. So let's take an example. So let's say you have a large LEA, more than 5,000 students with disabilities as of census day. And so their sample will be 500 students. Now for this year, the period of analysis will be from March 1st to April 28th. So during that 2-month period. So we're not asking for every minute for the whole year. We're asking for that 60-day-ish period, the services the students were supposed to receive, and how many did they receive. So for example, a student was supposed to receive 2,160 service minutes, and they only received 2,000. So that student received 93. And so you would say they were in bucket B, that 94.9 to 90% of IEP services implemented. And so this is the summary data that you would provide us. 410 students in the 95 to 100% range, 70 students in the 90% to 94.9% range, and the less than 90% of IEP services implemented would be 20. And then the percentages associated with them. So that's kind of a good example of what we would be receiving on our end. Next slide. So I just want to take a quick minute. There's some chats, there's some questions that we will do our best to try and answer. Somebody was saying that they hope that this webinar was as exciting as the Super Bowl. And I just hate to disappoint you that I don't think that's going to be, especially since my team won the Super Bowl this year. So it was very exciting in our house. Okay. Okay. Lots of questions about recording. I think we've fixed the recording issue, so we're good on that end. You should have closed captioning at the bottom. For those of you who do not have it so far, it should be at the very bottom. There's a button that says closed captioning. And we're getting some questions about whether or not the material will be available. And the materials are currently available. We provided that link to the participants this morning, and we will send it out to the participants after this meeting. So you will have lots of opportunities to get that. Okay. Lots of questions about recording. I'm just going through these. So we're getting some questions here about what happens if a student is absent, right? So if a student is absent, so one of the things, and we'll kind of talk a little bit, let me unpack a little bit about why we went with this method as opposed to something like, say, in CalPads, because one of the things we wanted to do is give folks ranges because we understand that things happen. What we don't want you to have to do and spend a lot of time and energy on is saying, Johnny didn't get his services today, and what is the reason for that, right? We didn't want to have you sift through those reason codes. We wanted to say, in general, if a student is absent for a day or a period of days, maybe that percentage would be a little bit different. And that's okay. It's, again, we are not seeing this as a compliance forced element. We are seeing this as understanding where the LEA is at and identifying LEAs who need additional supports in this space. And that's not going to be every LEA in the state. It's going to be a small portion of LEAs who will receive some supports. We will provide resources to some others. But this, again, is not about sort of punishment or those kinds of things. It's about understanding where we can support LEAs more in this space and understanding that this is a very difficult, nuanced issue because there's lots of variables that impact this. Okay, so somebody asked, does the phrase number of students with disabilities include IFSP? So for this purposes, we are only looking at students ages 3 through 22. So on your list, you will not receive students who have IFSPs. Students who have IFSPs are students who are ages 0 through 2. So, and yes, the students with disability number is the students with IEPs. So this does not include students with 504 plans. Somebody was asking, will you give us the list of students before or after? So we're going to give them to you towards the end of April, and then you'll go back and look and see how it kind of worked. So a lot of any of the documentation around absences, you all can keep that at the local level and provide the percentages to us. And again, this isn't about any individual student. This is about generally what we see in the district, right? So if you have one student out of, say, your sample of 100 who missed a number of days and they couldn't be included, we're going to be looking at the totality of all the students in the districts. I'm trying to go through some of these questions before I hand it over to my colleague, Chris Williams, so that he can tell you a little bit about the system. Somebody asked, we were notified earlier that we would be looking at data from February to April. Has that changed? That has changed. Thank you so much for that question. And I'll tell you why that's changed. We wanted to give you all a little bit more space to kind of think through this. Before we rolled it out. So yes, it is going to start 3/1/2023. And I think a lot of the questions that you're asking specifically are going to be answered in our Q&A as well. Okay, so I think we've gone through a lot of these. I want to spend some more time on these towards the end. I might be typing answers to these questions as we move forward, but I do want to keep us moving along. And then if we have time at the end to go through more questions, we will. But I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Chris Williams, who's going to actually be walking through the website itself and what it's going to look like when you log in, how you're going to get that student list, and how you're going to upload the reports for that information. So, Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Williams. I'm a research data specialist here in Special Education Division. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what the website's going to look like, how the reporting is going to work. When you initially are sent information, there will be a list of access codes. We will initially send these out to the SELPA. We'll then distribute the access codes for each LEA out to their respective LEAs. So at this portal, this is the first page you'll see. You will enter your access code here. Once you click to log on, this is the LEA view. So if you are an LEA, this is the first page you will see. The top right over here, you'll see a link to download all of your student records. So once you downloaded that spreadsheet, you'll have all the information for what students need to be evaluated for this data collection. Once all the calculations have been made, on the lower right section of the screen here, you can see the 3 categories that we're looking to collect. And here's where you will enter how many students fall into each of those 3 categories. It will total the number of students as you enter them, so you can see if you actually entered the number that was requested. Try to enter as close to, or as, if you can, please enter all of the students' information. It will let you save the data if you say submitted less, but we prefer if you could respond with the information for all the students total. The bottom has a button to save the data before you submit it, and there's a note to confirm the data that you've submitted is correct before you actually submit it. So once you have submitted your data, the next page is going to ask you to certify that the data that you've submitted is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge based on the behalf of the district under the principal. So here is where the submitter will submit their name, contact information, to acknowledge the certification there. And then once you submit, please be sure to, before you submit, make sure everything is correct, because once you are submitting the data, no changes can be made to your submission. So once you've submitted, the next page you'll see will reflect your status, which will show awaiting self-review rather. The box that information is in will also be a color-coded background. Yellow is in review, green is approved, and you'll see it background in red if it was rejected for any reason with a note. So the SELPA view, when you log in with the same login, first page you'll see is a list of the LEAs that you have for review. And if there is a submission, at the bottom you can see there's a link waiting for review. If you click on the review submission button, bring you to a screen which will show the data that particular LEA is submitted. The left side of the screen would show the student information that's been redacted for this presentation. But on the right, there's an arbitrary number of students that would fall into specific categories. And at this point, you can either, if everything looks like it was done correctly and you confirm that it's done correctly, you can click the approve submission button. If not, you can choose to reject, and you can enter a reason. Say, for instance, if they submitted a significant number less than the total that they provided, you'd like them to go back and review, you can enter the note in there and then click that to save the note, and then save it. It will submit, and it'll send them an email back to the LEA contact explaining to them why the submission was rejected. And as well, they'll also receive an email from the system once the submission is approved. And back to the SELPA confirmation page, once you've approved a submission, you'll get a confirmation screen showing that the submission was approved. Go back through and click the view submission link to check it again to see if you want to review it. And the user actions link there, it also shows the option to download all the LEA records for your SELPA. And so this data validation requirements, CD does require that the data that you're submitting is verified and certified by the superintendent or the principal. And the validity and reliability of that data. So
I could say, so I could talk a little bit about this. I was answering a question, so sorry about that. Back on. Hello, everyone. I was trying to answer a question. So we are going to be, so when you do this calculation, we want folks to kind of keep that information on how that occurred at the local level. At some point, we might ask you. We want to make sure that one of the things we have to make sure is that we want to make sure that everyone's being honest with us about this information. Even if it doesn't look so great for your LEA, that's okay. We have to start somewhere with supporting you and providing ideas and providing that communication to folks like our leadership, to providing that information to the legislature about, hey, this is where we see this piece. What we want folks is to be honest and not be fearful. And so, again, this is not a compliance. Even if your LEA does not look so good in this data right now, there's no woodshed we're going to take you out to. It doesn't exist. What we're going to do is say, hey, can you explain to us a little bit more what's going on? Is there a way that we can improve this data for students? We believe that you all are as committed as we are to ensuring that students have everything that they need to be successful. The question is, how can we help facilitate that for LEAs who are struggling? So one of the things we're going to do is we might ask you like, hey, how did you come up with this percentage? Can you just kind of show me how that worked? And then you'll just say, oh, look, we got this sets of students, and then this was the percentages, and this is how we got this number. So that's the kind of validation, but that's not going to happen for every LEA. It's going to happen. We're going to randomly select like 10% of LEAs, so about 200, and we're going to ask them, hey, how did you get here? So just know that's kind of what we will be doing. We are not asking you all to send us IEPs. Please do not send us IEPs here at the state level. We are not asking for student level data. We are only asking you like, how did you get to that percentage? And we'll walk through that with you. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit? We're getting some questions like, how do I get the log on for this system? What is that going to look like? When am I going to get the students? Can you want to talk about the process that people can expect from us shortly?
Sure. So at the end of the analysis period from at the end of April, we will be emailing to the SELPA contacts the list of the access codes for both the SELPA and the LEA. And then from that point, the SELPA will then distribute those access codes to all the LEA contacts that are going to be in charge of submitting the data. So it will also be at that point that you will receive the random selection data of students that will be uploaded to that website that you can download with your access code. So it should be the same point of time.
So we're getting some questions like, I don't understand. Are we giving you percentages? Are we giving you percentages per student? So do you want to go back up to that slide that showed the categories? I think it was right before our description of the website.
Yes.
That one. Yes. So what we're asking you to do is we're going to give you a number of students, like in this instance, 500, and we're going to ask for you to tell us how many received 95 to 100, like what percentage of those. In this instance, 410 students divided by 500 equals 82% times 100, 82%. So we are going to ask you to tell us that percentage. So it is you're going to calculate how many students fall into each bucket, and then the percentage of students within each bucket. So I think that kind of will help a little bit. We definitely in the Q&A will provide you some examples on how to do that, because I do think that is something that is coming up that is maybe a little bit confusing for folks. Just know that even if you don't feel like you get it right this first year, we're going to continue to work and refine on this, and we're going to be receiving feedback on how to make it easier and better for you. Yeah. Yeah, we can go back down to the next slide. Just trying to go now. Okay, so let's talk about what this is going to look like within the timeline. So right now we're training. We're going to continue to answer questions, provide FAQs, make things available for folks. And then March 1 to April 1 is the period of collection for LEA's implementation. At this point, during that period, you don't have to actually do anything, just your normal work of providing services to students. And then towards the end of April, we're going to provide you the logon through your SELPA for our website, and then you will log on and you'll have your list of students, and then you'll look at that information And you'll pull it from your systems, either your electronic systems. Some districts will use paper and pen systems. That's okay if you have an Excel spreadsheet system. So whatever system you'll pull that information from, and then you will calculate that. You'll have a couple of months to do that. So it's not as though we're going to ask for it in a day or a week. We understand that these are a little bit more labor intensive, especially since we've never done it before. But we also wanted to make sure that we are providing some time for you all to do that. And if we get to the end of June and districts are really struggling in this space, then we can definitely talk about how we're going to extend some of that timeline, maybe another 10 or 15 days. But we're going to look at it sort of on a case-by-case basis. But you'll have about 60 days to do those calculations and submit that information to us. So that's kind of what we will look. You need to make sure you have your SELPA approve it as well. My guess is many of you all will be working with your SELPAs as you walk through this process. I do want to let you know we're trying our best to get through a lot of the questions. I'm answering some of them verbally. We are typing some of them, but there's about 250 of them. I imagine a lot of them will come through in our Q&A. So please know that we do see your questions and we'll do our best to answer them. Do you want to go to the next slide? So again, I just want to reiterate that this is not a compliance element. This is not we're looking to punish teachers or paraeducators or any of those folks. What we're trying to do is to understand a little bit more about where LEAs and which LEAs are struggling at a systemic level. We do not want children pulled out of their classrooms where they're thriving to be given services. We don't want people to say kids can't go on field trips or go to school dances or go to the band recitals. Like, we don't want that. We want kids to be included. What we're trying to understand is that where are districts at a systemic level having struggles with getting lots of kids their services, not one or two kid, but a systemic level with lots of kids. So I just kind of understand. We also have an email here that we are monitoring. So please, if you have questions that come up or you feel like something needs to be in a Q&A that we can review, please email us those questions. We are going to obviously be taking all the questions that we have here. And I'm going to continue to go through the questions as much as I can. The next slide is just questions, right? It's just questions. Do you want to pull the website, not the website, the email back up? That way people can see it as I'm answering these questions. So,
Try to summarize the questions in a FAQ document and make that available to everyone later.
Yeah, we have some FAQs that we're going to go ahead and send out to you all today, but we're going to continue to add to that. So there's going to be lots of FAQs that are going to be coming out in this space. So here's a good question that we're getting is, what if a student is not enrolled during the collection period? They leave, or they are, or they were in census, but they're not anymore.
So part of the criteria before we pull a random sample for the students that we're going to submit to you for evaluation is that student is there on the end date of that evaluation period. So we're ensuring that the students that have IEPs and are part of your LEA were actually there during that time period. So that's one of the safeguards that we're looking to. That should not say.
Yeah, some of the folks that were asking questions were saying, hey, we are, how do we pull that sample? What does that sample look like? Don't worry, you do not have to pull the sample. We will do that. And one of the reasons we're waiting until the end of the data collection period, that period of review, is because we want to make sure that we're selecting students that were enrolled for the entirety of the time that during that period from March 1st to April 28th. So please know that we will be providing you the list of students, and we will make sure that they were enrolled in your LEA. Did you have something about that?
Yes, specifically, we're looking at the CalPADS data that are enrolled at that point.
Yeah, so we're going to be pulling the CalPADS data. So the enrollment data from CalPADS, that's what we will be looking at when we pull that data. So please do not worry. We're going to try our best. And if you find a student that isn't enrolled anymore because of a mistake or they didn't get disenrolled, that's fine. It's okay. Do your best. And, if you miss a student here or there, that's okay.
Yeah.
So here's a question that we are getting, which is, how do you determine the percent of services provided? So the percent of services would look at, we have, like I said, if a student was supposed to receive, let's say 100 minutes of services during that period, between March 1st and April 28th, then you say, okay, we're going to look at all the services that they received during that period. They received 90 minutes of service or 95 minutes of service. So for that student, they fall into the 95% category, and you would sort of mark them in there. So that's kind of how you would collect that. Understanding that we're going to continue to answer your questions about how to refine this and how this works for you all over time. I think we answered this question, but just to let you know, if a student moved during the time that they were, if you get a student on your list who's moved, just don't include them in your calculation. You don't have to include them. That's okay.
And if submitting and it's less than the total of the sample that we submitted,
Yeah.
you can have that discussion between the SELP and the LEA to explain why that number was missing from the total. Could be that particular reason. Acceptable.
So I did answer this before, but I'm going to answer it again. The final submissions are going to be due on June 30th. So you'll have to log in and SELPA will approve. We want to make sure, remember, somebody asked in here as well, so I'll kind of do a two for answer question. Is that the, what is the SELPA certifying? So that just as the SELPA would certify any data collection, they're the data collection entity. And so they would just certify that up to their knowledge, this is accurate data, and they will work with you, and we'll continue to work with the SELPA organization to make sure that they have the information they need to make that happen. Is the superintendent allowed to certify by way of designee? Absolutely. A superintendent can certify by designee in this process. So somebody was saying, well, we're not going to know who the students are until the end. Correct. And that's mostly because we want to make sure that we're getting students in there who were there the entirety of the data collection period, right? So if we gave you a student in on March 1st, well, that student might leave March 15th, and then it wouldn't be a really good, accurate collection. So we want to make sure that we're getting students that are there the entire of the collection period. Somebody's asking, okay, so tell me what's really going on. What's the threshold for additional support? And the question is, I don't know if we exactly know that yet. But if you know anything about our monitoring, we have tiers of monitoring. So the basic tier of monitoring is universal support, where we provide resources to everyone. And then there are some districts who need just an additional level of support, meaning they might need some targeted resources that can help them. They might need some data support in terms of collecting this data and making sure the data is inputted correctly. And then some districts are really struggling, and that can be layered in lots of different ways. So I don't know if it's an exact cutoff yet. We need to see the data first, but I can guarantee you not every district is going to need additional support. Not every district is going to be flagged. That is not going to happen. It is going to be, all districts will provide some kind of resources on our websites. Some districts will be provided some targeted support depending on what the issue is. And then some districts will receive a little bit more intensive support. And those are really reserved for the districts who are really struggling in this space. But I can't tell you what that looks like because we've never collected this data before. So if I were to sort of go into a hat and pick districts for this monitoring, it wouldn't be clear or fair for us to do that because we've never collected the data before. So we want to get the data in, see what it looks like, coordinate with our SELPA partners, coordinate with our advisory partners, and talk with them about how we can make sure we're making the best decisions about who would fit into each tier. So how would you document students who are leave the window? Now, we hope you wouldn't have very many of those, but if you don't have them, then just don't include them in your final analysis. That's okay. Let's see here. I think I've gone through the moving where, and okay, so here's a good one. How does the superintendent certify? Just like with CalPads, just like with a lot of our things, most of the times they would identify a designee. But you may have some superintendents who are very attuned to this type of information, and they will identify those directly. Oh, I've been meaning to like click done once I answer a question live so everyone can see the question. Apologies. I will put these up here. Folks are like, you haven't answered any of the questions. I really have. I just haven't clicked the make them live. Okay. Okay, so somebody's asking, will all datas and LEAs in the state be required to provide this data? Yes, this is a statewide data collection that we are required. So every district in the state should be providing this data to us. So somebody's asking what data files are uploaded. You're not uploading any data files. Actually, you'll just go into the system and input 3 numbers. Do you want to just go back to that slide, Chris, so folks can see what is the information we are collecting? So if you can
here on the bottom right is where you're going to be entering the data. It's just those 3 numbers, those 3 percentage categories of how many students fall into what percentage of those IEP services were provided to that student. So here you've got 350 of that sample of 500 fell into a category where they received anywhere from 95 to 100% of their services for their IEP. And then from there down, 100 fell into the second category and 50 into the less than 90%. So ideally, we'd like to see that LEAs are providing most of the services to all of their students. So most of those should fall at the top. Worst case, say like if there's a lot under the 90%, then there may be some systemic issue that would require some technical assistance. Those might be some of the things that they would when the data comes in. But like Shyla was saying, we don't yet know how this is going to look until we see what comes back after this submission is complete.
So I am just kind of going through some of these questions. Some folks are asking really great questions that we may need to sit down and think about a little bit more. So I just want to let you know, if we're not getting you to your question, it's not because we don't care, we're ignoring it. It's because we may need to think about it in this instance right here. And this is the reason we wanted to have the questions come in like this, because then I can download them all and we can sit through them and identify which ones go into Q&As. So somebody was asking, are we counting the students, the number of students in each percentage range? Yes. So you'll identify each one in each percentage range. So not each student, but the number of students within the range. Somebody is asking, superintendent certified, does that mean SELPA also certifies? Yes. So there's 2 levels, because when we collect data by state law, the SELPAs are the ones that have to do the final submission of data. Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for that. Go ahead.
So here is where the individual from the LEA level will enter their information that they are certifying that this information is correct on behalf of the superintendent or principal. And then once that certification window is clicked submit at the bottom there, the SELPA will then get to see it and take a look to review the submission, and then they do the secondary level of approval at this point.
So what reports are expected to be uploaded? Provider logs, attendance sheets? Don't upload any of those things. You're not asking for any of those things. We're asking you to look at the data of the students we provide, and then you tell us the ranges. Now, we will be validating a random sample of LEAs. So we will be looking at 10% of LEAs in the state, and we will say, hey, this is the number you got. Can you just walk us through how that occurred? So, but we're not asking you to upload student level data or to upload provider logs or any of those things. Those you keep locally. So this was a little bit confusing. So somebody said, so for this 2-month period, all LEAs will be required to submit information, and then in future years, only 10%. So I apologize if that was confusing. So every LEA every year will provide this information. However, after it's submitted to us this summer, we will select 10% and then we'll ask them how they got to those calculations. So we'll just kind of do a little bit of a validation, just a check and balance. And we'll do that every year. So every year, every LEA is going to be submitting this data.
There's yeah, on this slide on the second point.
So this kind of goes back to this question again. Are you asking us to submit evidence? No, you keep the evidence locally. And then if we ask you for that, then we'll look at it. But you keep that locally. Okay, so this is a really good question. What is the role of principals? Do school sites have to certify this data? This is an LEA level collection. We don't expect individual teachers to submit data, and we don't expect individual school sites to send us data. We're only asking at the LEA level. So my guess is that somebody in the LEA level will be tasked with looking at this information and this data. It wouldn't be school sites necessarily doing that individually. We're getting some questions about yearly service and how that's going to be calculated. I need to sit down with those questions a little bit closely because I want to be able to make sure that I'm reading it really clearly and talking about it with the team. So if you asked a yearly service question, meaning we provide services on a yearly basis, how do we calculate that? I just want to sit down and we will walk through that in a Q&A. But I do see those questions coming in. It's come up a few times. We're not ignoring it. I just want to sit down with it and with the team and make sure that we're giving you a really clear answer. Somebody is asking, is this a yearly mandate? And if so, what will be the windows for future years? I think we're going to see how this goes. If we're able to get like an adequate number of a level of data, we might move to a 60-day, or if we need more data, we might go to a 90-day, but it will never be more than that. So it's never going to be like, we're going to ask for every minute, every year. I think we're just trying to figure out what works best for us in this period. Does the SELPA admin certify or the LEA superintendent or both? And it's both. And so, yeah, you'd have both of them approved, just like kind of how you do now with CalPADS, where the LEA certifies and then the SELPA certifies. It's the same. We're getting some questions about specific types of services. Again, we're going to need to I want to look closely because there's lots of different services sort of being asked about. And I want to make sure that when we we want to group all those questions together so we can put on an FAQ that will cover most of them. So if you ask a specific service question, like a student receives speech, how do we do that? Or a student receive this type of service, how do we do that? We see it, and it's going to be included in our FAQs over time. I don't believe it's there now, but we will definitely get it into something like that. We're getting some charter questions about what to do with the charter information. And so we will definitely put those in the QA. We've gotten a lot of those. So I want to kind of combine them all because they're all asking kind of a nuanced set of questions. So I see you if you asked a charter question, we'll get there. And the reason I'm kind of trying to sum up, it's 1:58 and we're going to have to close our webinar soon, but I wanted to be able to get through as many. I wanted to recognize that, yes, there's a lot of questions in here and we see them and we're going to work through them. I do see a lot of folks asking about SAI and speech and those kinds of questions. Again, we're going to pull those questions together, all the questions that asked about specific services into an FAQ.
And once we've compiled all those answers, we'll send those out to you as soon as possible.
We're also getting some questions about breaks during that period. That's going to come out in the FAQ. So we see those questions. But this is about the services that are supposed to be received versus the services that were received. So you don't provide services typically on a Saturday or Sunday. So if you have a spring break, we wouldn't say that they would be identified during that period, but that's going to come out in the FAQ. I know we have 1 minute. I've been given the 1 minute warning. So somebody was asking, how will this look like next year and ongoing years? Will the timeframes be the same? I think they'll be about the same. This will be a spring kind of collection, but we still have to learn about what works and what doesn't work with this collection. So we're getting some spring break questions. We'll definitely put those in the FAQ. So if you ask the spring break question, we see it. And I have been given the warning that we are out of time. We knew that this would happen. We knew that they would get lots of questions. If you have questions and you still want to put them into the Q&A, we can accept those questions. But we have many questions in the Q&A. A lot of them cover the same topics. So I think we're going to kind of pull a lot of them together in similar ways and go from there. Thank you all so much. If you didn't get your question into the Q&A, please feel free to email it to IEP implementation. If you already put it into the Q&A, we got it. You don't have to send it again. But if you didn't get to put it in the Q&A for whatever reason, please go ahead and send it to us at iep-implementation@cde.ca.gov. So thank you all so much for your time and energy in this space. I know that this feels a little bit different for us. And it's new. New stuff is always really hard, but I promise you, we understand that this is a challenge and we are not trying to make things really difficult for everyone. So thank you all so much for your time today, and we hope to talk to you soon.